Hi, everyone. I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm welcoming Todd Schulman, executive producer of the Amazon Freevee comedy series Jury Duty, to our PGA Awards Meet the Nominees panel. Todd, what a wild and unforeseen journey this jury duty experience has been for you guys. I mean, in your wildest dreams, could you imagine this little experiment in stealth comedy? You're getting 4 Emmy nominations, Golden Globe, Critics' Choice, PGA nominations, competing against Barry and Ted Lasso and The Bear. You must pinch yourself every day.
I say to people, I say we now have a taste of what Ronald went through of like this doesn't feel like reality because I don't think any of us I think we all thought it was a win we got to make this show. So the idea it's had this level of success and getting nominated for awards just is, as you say, very surreal.
Did you suffer any sleepless nights before you premiered? I mean, fearing that this could all go completely sideways and be the end of your career if things didn't work out with Ronald? I mean, I would imagine that you all had to be on pins and needles with this.
Yeah, I mean, so I've worked in this kind of genre before, but never where all your eggs were in this kind of basket with one person for what ended up being 17 days. And so yeah, there was a lot of anxiety for everyone involved. But we had projected so much confidence to Amazon that I felt like we just had to pretend like we believed in it and knew it would definitely work even when we didn't. But yeah, it's certainly, I mean the stress of it is the excitement of it, and I think all of that translates on screen. When you're watching the show, you're kind of watching on two levels, right, where you can enjoy both ideally it as like a narrative comedy, that you've seen a million times before, but you're also enjoying it knowing the live wire tension of at any moment this could have gone wrong, we wouldn't be watching this TV show. And I think that really amplifies your enjoyment in watching the show, but certainly when you're making it, it amplifies your anxiety.
Yeah, that really is the whole idea of it. The whole idea of it is the drama of, well, that, I mean, we imagine since we're watching it that it didn't all go sideways, but even so, there's real drama inside the comedy. But if it were possible, I mean, to kind of step outside and become a casual observer, Todd, what do you think it was about the show that made it become this viral sensation?
Man, I wish I knew so we could do it many more
Yeah, you want to
times.
bottle it, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think so much of the credit has to be about Ronald. I think he ended up being just the ideal person to make this kind of show with because he is truly a lovely human being. And I think people watching the show, I mean, we knew or we thought we were going to make something that was funny and interesting, and we were aiming for heart, but I think the level of kind of emotional connection we achieved, really so much of that goes to Ronald and the fact that people just fell in love with him, and that was not something where we cut it in a way to make him seem like this wonderful human being. Like he really exuded that at every moment the opportunity presented itself. So yeah, I think that is kind of it's Ronald, and then TikTok algorithms are really what we have to thank.
So you're sitting there just like rooting, please do the right thing, Ronald. Please do the right thing, Ronald. As he's doing this, instead of, being a horrible human being, and you're like, oh God, because we don't want this to look like, this isn't supposed to be an indictment of a person. It's supposed to be something that actually lifts people. And if you hadn't had a guy like that, I mean, he thinks he's joining a documentary about the jury system, right? He has no
Exactly.
ideas in the middle of a sitcom.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was the whole concept of the show was, I had worked with Sacha Baron Cohen for a long time, and he's a genius and the godfather of all of this in many ways. And but like a lot of what we were doing there was kind of rightfully exposing like bad people and their terrible viewpoints, like that, not always, but that was often what we were trying to do. And so part of the idea of making this show was like, could we use some of the same techniques, but to highlight like a wonderful human being? And so, but that required someone to actually be a wonderful human being. And luckily, despite, sometimes the world feels like it's in short supply of that, Ronald was one of them.
And then, of course, the ultimate climax, Ronald signs an overall deal with Amazon MGM Studios to produce,
Yes.
develop, and star in projects. Clearly, you didn't crush the man's spirit.
No, look, I've now had the opportunity, been very lucky to go to the Emmys and the Golden Globes with Ronald, and I always tell people he's the most comfortable person in the room. He's like, because I think for him, this is all, he showed up for jury duty and now he's at like these award ceremonies, like, and so yeah, no, he's living his best life, and I think, very, very happy with how everything turned out.
So at what point did you suspect something kind of magical was happening? Was it when you found out, I guess, 100 or several 100 million people were watching clips of it on TikTok?
Yeah, we were all, on a big text chain, and we'd be like, "Oh wow, look at this video. This has, and it started off really small. I'd be like, "Wow, 100,000 people watched our trailer. This is amazing." Like I can't believe it. And then, a few weeks in, it was all of a sudden like, wait a second, like this TikTok video has like 17 million views. Like, what is going on here? And then, you would start to hear about, I would hear from my parents' friends who would tell me that their grandchildren told them they had to watch this show. And like, you start to realize it was kind of traveling generationally upwards, that like TikTok was discovering it and being like, this is something my parents would like. And so once that starts happening, because, we live in such a fragmented culture, when you make something, you're hoping it just finds one small fragment. Like that's enough sometimes, but the idea that we made something and that started to travel through these various ecosystems and connected with like a lot of different people was really, once again, beyond our wildest dreams.
Because you're on Amazon Freevee. They don't necessarily even have an identity yet. So you're just hoping that someone watches you. You're not
When we
you're not
sold
thinking
it, it
you're
was
getting viral.
IMDb TV. So, that was, and
It was originally IMDb TV. That's right.
exactly. And so Amazon Freevee, that name was like mid-production for us, is when we discovered that's what we would be airing on. And by the way, so much credit to Lauren Anderson and Christelle Miller and everyone at Freevee, because, it's kind of the opposite of Daisy Jones and the Six in a way, where we pitched this all over town and people thought it was interesting, but it wasn't like a bidding war. It wasn't that. And Lauren Anderson heard the pitch and immediately was like, I will make this show. And, we were just excited that someone said yes, and we were going to get to make a show. But we certainly had no expectation of what was going to transpire.
How key, Todd, was James Marsden's going all in, giving the performance of his wife as this entitled Hollywood jerk. That made it was such a difference in watching it. Made it so much more entertaining.
Sure. Once again, I mean, you can't underestimate also, like, we had this role we had not yet filled of the hero, which ended up being Ronald, who we've talked about. But then when we were pitching the show, we also had this role of a celebrity. We didn't have James Marsden yet. And it was always kind of like, I knew we could find a real person, like that's easy enough. But it was like, can we find an actual celebrity who's going to be, you're not going back to your trailer after every take, you're sitting in a jury room sometimes for 6 hours and the camera's never on you. You're just sitting there having to read a script, or do, basic action, eat lunch. And, there are not a lot of people who would be down for that, especially once again, now there's a kind of proof of concept with jury duty. You can say, of course I would do that. But at the time, this was all uncharted territory. And James, to his immense credit, we pitched it to him, and his only concern was like, I don't want this to be mean-spirited. He loved it, but he wanted to make sure that the Ronald character would end up having a good experience. And he went all in. To his credit, he had no qualms about satirizing himself, satirizing the industry, and also just like being down to, being part of an ensemble. There's 12 people in that room, and, James obviously has his storyline, but often it's not about him. And he's there for every second of it. He was incredible.
And he had to be famous, but not too famous. He had to kind of thread the needle. It couldn't be like Robert De Niro in the
Yeah.
room. Well, clearly something's going on here.
Yeah. I think James Marsden post jury duty now might be too famous, but
Yeah, I was going to
pre
say,
jury duty was perfect.
now you ruined it for him. Any
Yeah,
possible anonymity.
exactly.
And I'm sure you get asked this all the time, Todd, but you know how much we love our sequels in this country. Is the jury duty concept repeatable in any other area of life or discussions happening? Strike when the iron is sort of hot.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have like talked about and trying to figure out if it's possible, but no, nothing concrete or anything like that yet. We're not like, full speed ahead on doing something. But certainly, like, we all loved the experience of making this. And so if we could ever figure out a way to do it again, I think that would be exciting for all of us. But I have no, like, there's no formal thing going on or anything like that yet.
I think we're going to wrap there. Todd, good luck to you at the upcoming PGA Awards. Jury Duty is currently streaming its 8 episodes over Prime Video. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.